Hi everyone, I'm Anya Parampil, and this is Red Lines. California police recently paid a visit to the home of anti-war activist Ryan Wentz, claiming he threatened the life of Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when he authored a tweet critical of her comments concerning Palestine. An April 7th tweet by Wentz went viral after he drew attention to a bizarre, jumbled response AOC gave during an event with the Jewish Community Relations Council. Here's how AOC responded when asked about how she believed peace between the Israelis and Palestinians could be achieved.
What actions do you think can be taken to support movements towards peace, both between Israelis and Palestinians, as well as within the entire region, such as the Abraham Accords?
Yeah. So, earlier just now, you and I were talking about the what and the how.
Yes.
And I think that when we talk about establishing peace, centering people's humanities, protecting people's rights, it's not just about the what and the end goal, which often gets a lot of focus. But I actually think it's much more about the how and the way that we are coming together and how we interpret that what and how we act in the actions that we take to get to that what. And so what this really is about is that it's a question more than anything else about process. And so we really need to make sure that that we are valuing a process where all parties are respected and have a lot of equal opportunity to really make sure that we are negotiating good faith, et cetera. That being said, I think that there's just this one central issue of settlements, because if the what that has been decided on is two state, then the action of settlements it's not the how to get to that what. And so, I think that that's a central thing that we need to make sure that we center and that we value Jewish and rather we value Israeli. We value the safety and the human rights of Israelis. We value the safety and the human rights of Palestinians in that process that is similar and that on equal footing. And so all of that is extremely important in that process.
The video was retweeted thousands of times, with Twitter users weighing in to lambast AOC for her meaningless comments on what should be a fairly straightforward issue for any progressive-minded person. Though Wentz made no reference to violence, police showed up at his doorstep on April 8th, insisting he threatened to kill AOC. Wentz spoke to the Grayzone about his experience.
So it was actually during the day. I had gotten back from work and was just outside my apartment, and I was waiting for a Postmates order, and I saw two officers dressed in plain clothes pop their heads out above the front gate, and they said my name, which was very weird. And so I approached them, and they showed me their badges, and they asked if they could come inside, and I said, no, we can talk out here. So I went around the gate, and they asked me if I had tweeted anything the day before threatening to kill a sitting member of Congress, which did not happen. And I repeated multiple times that I never said that, and I have no intention of doing that. And then they proceeded to ask me a bunch of really invasive questions about my mental health, about my family, about whether I own guns, about my work, and continued with this accusation that I threatened to kill AOC. They eventually specified that it was AOC, and they were there on behalf of the Capitol Police. And there was a tweet that was flagged and that said that I threatened to kill AOC. So yeah, that's really what happened.
And you never got a notification from Twitter actually noting that this tweet was offensive or flagged in any way?
No, and I've had tweets reported before, so I know how that works, and I didn't get any report from Twitter.
And you don't have any of your personal information tied to your Twitter account. So how do you think the police were able to figure out who you were, the man behind the account?
Yeah, it's very bizarre. I'm thinking that I maybe last year had posted a couple articles that I've written before, and my name was on those. But that's really all that I could think of. I never have my last name, especially on my Twitter account. I mean, now at this point, I might as well. But um, yeah, I just have Human Rights Watcher, and then my handle, which is Queer a la Mode. But they knew my name, they knew where I live, and it was really weird hearing them say my Twitter handle out loud.
Yeah, I'm sure it was kind of funny to have cops say that. Finally, what do you think this experience, because even if it wasn't necessarily AOC who reported the tweet, though I question if the Capitol Police would go so far into into an investigation if it wasn't actually a member of Congress making the claim against someone. What does all of this reveal? Because it's part of a wider trend. We've seen AOC. She's been the target of criticism, especially over the past few months. What does it reveal about the Democratic Party and whether or not progressive forces such as AOC or people like yourself, whether they can be included in the party or work within it?
Right. I mean, I think that on a lot of issues, AOC has fallen short in her analysis, whether it's or her criticisms of Democratic leadership, whether it's her silence on Biden's strike on Syria, her weird response about the horrific conditions at the border, and then the response that she had to the Capitol riots. It seems like she's embracing the national security state, the police state, these things that she will make mild criticisms of, and then when at the end of the day, she totally folds over for them.
To explore AOC's record on Palestine, I spoke with founder of the Electronic Intifada, Ali Abunimah. He recently penned an article titled AOC Panders to Israel Lobby. Ali Abunimah, welcome to Redlines.
Thanks, Anya.
There's been a lot of attention brought to the word salad, the comments AOC made when she was recently asked about peace between the Palestinians and Israelis. Can you explain, though, why the fact that she was speaking to the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York to begin with was a scandal in itself?
Yeah, of course, the Jewish Community Relations Council, the JCRC, would frame itself, and I think AOC would frame it as this is, basically representing the Jewish community of New York. And of course, she should talk to them because they're her constituencies. And in principle, of course, that's absolutely right. But in fact, what the JCRC is, to a large extent, is an Israel lobby group. It says it right on their website that one of the main things they do is support the line from major pro-Israel groups. And it's evident that they're taking politicians and community leaders on junkets to Israel. They're putting out pro-Israel propaganda from some really extreme right-wing pro-Israel groups, including the Israel on Campus Coalition that they promote. This is a group that was exposed by Al Jazeera's undercover documentary, The Lobby USA, as working secretly with Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs to spy on and sabotage the work of American college students and educators who support Palestinian rights. And the JCRC played a major role in justifying Israel's 2014 massacre in Gaza when it killed 11 children a day, on average, over 51 days, hosting live briefings with senior Israeli military officers and officials to justify the obliteration of entire families in Gaza. So that's the group that AOC was doing an event with.
And this group has even referred to the New York chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, a party which supported AOC in her primary run and her runs for Congress, as anti-Semitic.
Correct. Yeah, New York DSA or the DSA, which recently referred to AOC as one of its superstars. She's been a long-time member. They're very proud of her. And in fact, the JCRC of New York denounced NYC DSA as anti-Semitic for a candidates questionnaire in which they asked candidates not to go on exactly the kind of propaganda junkets to Israel that the JCRC organizes in order to build support for the violation of Palestinian rights. And for that, they were called anti-Semitic. And yet she did this event with them where it was all smiles and all friendly and all chummy. She never took them to task for those disgusting smears against her own DSA comrades. And she never took them to task for Israel's occupation, apartheid, and war crimes against Palestinians.
No, in fact, she did the opposite. Let's take a listen to other comments she made during that event with the JCRC, in which she actually praises Israel for its advances in wastewater circulation.
I just want to end with one additional question, as you being the author of the Green New Deal. As you may be aware, Israel is a leader in environmental sustainability, especially in water conservation, reforesting, and solar power. In fact, various sustainability projects around the world have been founded and supported by Israeli organizations in the wakes of various natural disasters. I was in Barrio Real, Puerto Rico, 2 years ago, and I saw the electricity-free sand water filtration system that was built by Israel, which is just incredible after the devastation wreaked by Hurricane Maria. So as the author of the GND, I understand it's called, might there be components of the Green New Deal in New York or around the world where Israeli ecological expertise could be employed to upscale real solutions and address the climate crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are systems that have emerged that are deeply inspiring about our hopes and prospects for the future. And to me, how I feel about especially scientific progress, not just in the field of climate science, but also overall, this applies to medical breakthroughs, et cetera, is that they are only as useful as much as they can be universally applied to help all of us. Because if we develop these scientific breakthroughs, like if we had a vaccine, for example, that was developed, but it was only available to just small, slim sections of society, how great is that vaccine really? And so I think there's so much promise that has been released here, and I believe that Israel's technology around wastewater circulation, 90%. This is going to be so important for us to collaborate and work together, especially as water scarcity increases for vulnerable communities, both, yes, across the world, but also right here in the United States. We have had parts of our country already starting to experience droughts. And then on the other side of that issue, flooding as well. And so I think that's really important. Israeli EV development has had a lot of promising technologies in how we actually power a lot of EVs. We got the sedans down, and now we need to get the Ford F-150s and some of these big guys. And so, EV powertrain technology that Israeli scientists have developed, as well as I think also from a policy perspective, the actual investment and the policy investments and valuing of scientists is something that we really could inspire U.S. investment in how we treasure and value our scientists as well.
Right, 100% correct, and I'm very pleased that you see in Israel what we see in Israel in terms of its potential for being of value around the world.
Why is this statement so absurd when you consider the perspective of Palestinians, Ali?
It was really disturbing because what Michael S. Miller, the CEO of the JCRC, was doing is he was putting forward this standard Israeli propaganda talking point that Israel is this oasis of green technology and environmental stewardship, when nothing, absolutely nothing, could be further from the truth. And he even went as far as to say that, after the hurricane 2 years ago, Israel was actually helping in Puerto Rico, which, as we know, is a cause dear to AOC's heart because she considers it correctly to be a colony of the United States. And so it was really cynical propaganda. She should have pushed back by saying, no, I reject the idea that Israel is helping Puerto Rico when Israel is actually destroying the water sources in Palestine. Israel has imposed medieval siege conditions on the Gaza Strip such that 97% of the water in Gaza is unfit for human consumption. Israel uses the occupied West Bank as a literal garbage dump. It illegally dumps Israeli waste in the West Bank, Israeli settlements, which are again built in the West Bank in violation of international law, allow their sewage just to run down into Palestinian villages and water sources. So instead of challenging this disgusting Israeli greenwashing propaganda, AOC actually went along with it and praised Israel's so-called technological prowess. It was really revolting to watch.
Before AOC won her seat in Congress, she actually spoke out against the Israeli massacre, as she characterized it, of Palestinians as they participated in the Great March of Return, a movement in the besieged Gaza Strip. How has her position changed since then, when she actually said she hoped that members of Congress would have the moral courage to criticize Israel over its actions?
Well, as far as I know, that tweet on May 14th, 2018, the day that Donald Trump opened the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, the same day that Israeli snipers massacred 60 unarmed Palestinian men, women, and children in the Gaza Strip protesting for their freedom. She tweeted rightly that it was a massacre, and she called on members of Congress. She wasn't a member of Congress at that point, but she called on people in the Democratic Party to have the moral courage to call it what it was. And as far as I could tell, that was the last time she ever tweeted about Gaza. There were a couple of other tweets that mentioned Palestinians since 2018. But it seems she got the message that she should just shut up about this if she wants to get ahead.
She also denounced the occupation before she was elected, and then immediately walked back those comments during a PBS interview, saying that she was not an expert on the situation.
What people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of Palestine, is just an increasing crisis of humanitarian condition.
Do you think you can expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue. For me, I'm a firm believer in finding a two-state solution in this issue.
So I wonder what you think. Is this merely cynical opportunism? Is she using Palestine when she wanted to get elected on a progressive platform and now backing away from it? Or is she completely unaware? Does she have aspirations within the Democratic Party also that would perhaps encourage her to curry favor with Israel lobby groups such as the JCRC?
She's very good at playing the innocent. And shortly after she did that tweet about the massacre in Gaza, and after she won her primary in June 2018, she was interviewed on PBS, and she was taken to task for that very accurate tweet. And she was like, oh, well, I support Israel's right to exist, and I support a two-state solution, and I don't really know too much about this issue. Like, she played the innocent. And reverted to standard Democratic Party talking points. But since then, I really think she uses that kind of like, oh, I just don't know what's going on, as a cover for a more cynical and deliberate agenda. And I'll give you an example of this. Last September, she accepted to speak at an event for a memorial event for Yitzhak Rabin, the former Israeli prime minister who was assassinated 25 years ago, and who was an unrepentant war criminal for his entire adult life, participating in expulsions and massacres and war crimes against Palestinians for decades, and who never expressed any remorse about it. And she accepted to do a memorial event for him. When there was understandably an uproar from Palestinians and supporters of Palestinian rights, she canceled her participation, but she never said anything. And she allowed the impression to go out there that, oh, well, this was just a mistake. She didn't really get it. But as soon as it was explained to her, she did the right thing and pulled out. Now, in hindsight, after she did this event with this really extreme anti-Palestinian group, the JCRC in New York, I really think that was, in hindsight, I think it was a calculated effort to curry favor with the Israel lobby. She was called out on it, she backed off, and then she sought the next opportunity to find a way to pander to the Israel lobby, and that was this event that she just did on April 1st with the JCRC, where I think she showed us who she is with this disgusting praise of Israel, this really ridiculous word salad, where she couldn't utter a single coherent sentence in support of Palestinian rights or calling for Israel to be held accountable. And the cliche is, when people tell you who they are, believe them. But I think what we get instead is we get a lot of people on social media just making endless excuses. I guess the trendy word is gaslighting us, that, oh, there's some deeper game going on here, and that Palestinians should just shut up and be patient and wait their turn after 73 relentless years of US-backed, Congress-funded, the same Congress she sits in, Congress-funded Israeli war crimes.
That brings me to my final point, Ali, which is that as people make excuses for AOC, and this is not just unique to Palestine, but we've heard this on Force the Vote and other progressive left-wing agendas as well, but especially on Palestine, you'll hear people say exactly that it's a sensitive issue. We should be sympathetic to her because she's achieving so many other goals of the left within Congress, or she's speaking on our behalf in the halls of power. And so because Palestine is such a sensitive issue, we shouldn't pressure her on it. And this is a sentiment on the left that I think is really toxic. I'm wondering, what do you say to people who make that argument more widely?
Yeah, I don't hear anyone making that argument on any other issue. I don't hear people making that argument about LGBTQ rights, about trans issues, about racial justice. It was funny on that JCRC event. She talked about racial justice. She talked about Jim Crow. She talked about, every issue under the sun except Palestine. And when she was doing an event with a group that is a major supporter of Israel's crimes against Palestinians. So, are all these people who are telling Palestinians to wait and to shut up and just to continue to watch their land being stolen and their loved ones being murdered with American-funded weapons, are they willing to wait for their own human rights? Are they willing to put their own human rights on hold? If they're not, if they think that their human rights should be respected, they shouldn't dare to ever tell Palestinians to be quiet about theirs. And AOC is a politician. She's free to pursue whatever it is she wants to pursue. Maybe she has her eye on the Senate. Maybe she has her eye on the White House. That's her choice. But don't try to gaslight us and pretend that she's anything other than she is, which is just another politician, another Nancy Pelosi Democrat.
And I think anyone who, from the very moment they were elected, was willing to sell out the Palestinians, I think they'd be willing to sell out any one of us. And that's something that gets lost in all this. As you rightly say, we're never expected to I guess we were expected to put healthcare on the back burner, but we're not expected to.
That's true. That's very true. And of course, not just healthcare, which she refused to fight for. I think a lot of your viewers will know the background of Force the Vote and how, what she did in Force the Vote is she said, oh, well, we're not going to fight this fight because we have to keep our powder dry. We have to keep our leverage to fight for the $15 minimum wage. And then they didn't do that either. So what exactly is it that we're waiting for? What is this 12-dimensional chess game where, at some indeterminate point in the future, these progressives that people have fought for, people have given money to, people who don't have a lot of money have donated to them. When is this indeterminate point in the future where they're actually going to stand up for something and fight instead of just grandstanding and preening on the cover of Vanity Fair and gaslighting people that they're doing something when they're actually not doing anything at all?
And that's what your latest piece at the Electronic Intifada points out in showing she actually did this event with a group which had characterized her own party, the DSA, as anti-Semitic. If that doesn't tell you a bit about who AOC is, then I don't know what will. Ali Abunimah of the Electronic Intifada, founder and editor, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anya.